Okay, so here's the actual product. And I'll mix in some footage of me taking it out of the box because that's amazing, right? Anyway, so Wonder Swan Color. Basically, this was originally intended as a competitor to the Game Boy Color in the mid-90s. I go over it in the intro, but can't overstate it. This was the last innovation by Gunpei Yokoi, and a lot of what makes this special can be seen. Like, he's very much, even though he's no longer working for Nintendo at this point, he still had that Nintendo aesthetic. For example, this battery will give you about 20 hours of gameplay. This was kind of a major issue with the original Game Boy. I bought one not when they first came out, but I went out and got a part-time job because I wanted one so bad. And I bought one with my own money. Spent more on batteries probably than I did on the console. Like, it'll drink through 6 AA batteries in a car trip. This one not so much, so that's good. Price-wise, this was about maybe 2/3 of the cost of the Game Boy. So it was around $40, back in mid-90s, so value, it's gonna, inflation and everything, but the weird thing was the games cost almost that much. Like, games were like $38 or $20, for like a $40 system. Some people might mistakenly think that this was like a knockoff Game Boy, and that's not the case. It's very much its own creature. This is actually a 16-bit console, as compared to the Game Boy, which was an 8-bit, like a portable NES, basically. So, by the time this came out, Game Boy was getting kind of long in the tooth. They made the innovation of going to color, but otherwise they didn't really make any change. I think maybe the audio got a little better, and the games had like maybe a little more memory, a little more power. With this one, full 16-bit system, and they really took advantage of it. Like, a lot of the titles that I've seen online look pretty awesome. What I've played myself really looks, it's really pretty. So this is basically the middle mark between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance. You got 8-bit, 32-bit system, here's a 16-bit system. This was, if anything, this is probably competing more with the Neo Geo Pocket Color. It came out around the same time period, almost the same specs, different, sensibility really in what the system was for, who it was aimed at. Neo Geo, right, SNK, so that was mostly fighting games. They took advantage of, it's SNK Neo Geo system, so yeah, it's going to have a lot of fighters. This mostly had a lot of puzzling games, a lot of 2D platformers. It did have a lot of good JRPGs. Unfortunately, very language heavy games, so you can't really enjoy it if you're an English speaker and you don't speak Japanese. So, anyway, basically, this sold well. It was only in Japan, which is why you maybe never heard of it. So Gunpei's company paired up with Bandai, and they took advantage of a lot of those licenses that Bandai had, like Ultraman, a lot of anime titles, Mobile Suit Gundam, things like that. So yeah, it was kind of maybe aimed at younger kids or teenagers, which would probably explain the price point being a bit lower. They kept the price point lower because this bad boy is not backlit. Yeah, it's almost impossible to see in anything but direct light. So that's kind of an issue. So basically they got rid of that problem in the Wonder Swan Crystal. They replaced the screen. Basically, not exactly sure the specs offhand, but it was an improvement and you could see it, in a lot more environments. Whereas this one, it's kind of difficult. My wife was even complaining, how can you even see that very carefully? So, anyway, let me go ahead and show you the cartridge. This is cute, right? And here's nothing really to look at here. Unboxing video. Bam, box, no box. Came with some bubble wrap. That's, sorry to disappoint, it's not really interesting. There's some postage on the back from Japan, if that's cool. Something that would interest you. But anyway, I'll unbox this though. I'll take this out for you. So, you gotta love just like the effort that went into this. Look at that. And when you compare that with Nintendo, and usually, you know, there weren't a lot of cases that came with items, so that's kind of nice. And you've got an actual full-page manual, which I can't read because it's in Japanese. But yeah, here's the actual cartridge. One, you may notice the strip is very exposed here, where usually on a Game Boy Advance game, it's going to be recessed. See? You kind of have some protection from the elements here. Here, not so much. So, you know, you may find yourself cleaning these maybe a little bit more often. Maybe just take care of your stuff like an adult. Anyway, but I do want to share this with you. It's kind of a cool little startup sound, right? Must have a cartridge in order to do that, by the way. Kind of interesting. Unlike the Game Boy Advance. And as sound goes, not bad, right? No headphone jack, so that's kind of a step back there. There's also a mistake made by the Game Boy Advance, you know, no headphone jack without accessory. If you purchase the proper accessories, you can use headphones. So beyond that, as you can hear, we've got audio, which goes from loud as hell, not so loud, and where'd my sound go? I think there's 3, I know I pushed that about 4 times, there should be 3 settings altogether. You can adjust the contrast, and initially I thought this thing was broken when I bought it because the contrast was turned all the way up. Managed to figure that out without taking it apart, thankfully. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty interesting, so I thought I'd do like a little side-by-side for you. So here's your Wonder Swan Color. And here, this wasn't the competitor of the day, I don't have a Game Boy Color here, but I do have Game Boy Advanced. And as you can see, this is kind of the future, this is where it went. But this is possibly an influence, because you had a more powerful color handheld console that was more efficient in its use of, you know, batteries, didn't drain through them like previous consoles did. It was pocketable, it was portable. And I think you can see all of this influence maybe when Nintendo, this was not designed by Gunpei Yokoi, but maybe inspired by. You know, maybe there's some of that there. You know, and you look, the layout looks very similar. And this is the predecessor of this 32-bit console. So anyway, thought I'd kind of give that just for comparison's sake, but what else to say about this that I haven't already said? So these games run anywhere from about 10 to, you know, a couple of $100 depending. There's not as much of a collector market for this as, say, Game Boy Advanced or even Neo Geo Pocket because it's never had an American release, so you're going to have to import any of these that you get. It's not going to cost you that much for the console itself. Like I said, I got this one for about 24 bucks, and this isn't the ideal console. The ideal would be the Wonder Swan Crystal. It's very visible, as I said before, in pretty much any light. Again, not backlit. None of these consoles were backlit, and it helped to save on the overall cost as well as how quickly it went through batteries. So that was intentional. But yeah, as far as the games, that's going to be a different matter. This one cost me about, I think, 12 bucks all in, you know, including shipping. Some of the other cartridges will go for, some of the games will go for as much as a couple of $100. And there is some collectability, like I said, so some rare games may fetch a premium. For the most part, you're really just going to have trouble finding games that are very playable for a non-Japanese speaker. There's Puzzle Bobble, I've heard is good. You know, it's a puzzler. There's some Japanese, but you don't really need to know it. Some of the JRPGs, like their Final Fantasy, there's a couple of good Final Fantasy games on there. Might not be as accessible to you unless you've played a similar game, you know, because I think it's a port of an original Final Fantasy game. The one I bought is not that accessible. There's tons of text. Some of the actual gameplay, once you get to it, is fun and pretty self-explanatory, pretty intuitive. You don't really need to speak Japanese. You figure it out. But this is really just for, I would say, who is this for? I would say this console is mostly for maybe Japanese enthusiasts. You know, maybe for you weebs out there. Maybe Gunpei Yokoi fanboys. Perhaps, kind of in that club. Or if you just want something different that your friends haven't seen and you just like this sort of thing. If you're kind of a gadget file, I would say go for it. The price is low. I hope I don't adversely influence that by doing a video about it, but anyway, enjoy.